folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. Don't lie to yourself. You were pleased. It actually gave you pleasure seeing that dead girl's body. Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Erschen. This week we are doing another movie review. This is Daughters of Darkness, directed and co-written by Harry Kumel, released in 1971, starring Delphine Seyrig, Andrea Rao, Danielle O'May, and John Carlin. Now, Daughters of Darkness, I would say, is a film that both Jess Franco and Jean Rollin probably wish they made. Because it's a film that's both very artistic and very erotic and still very much a horror film. It never goes over the top with any of that. And it's also a lesbian vampire film as well. Never really over the top with that either, I would say. Everything is done very subtle, you know. Not like, say, a Jess Franco film where, you know, kind of oozes over into the sleaze land, yeah. This film is very erotic without going that way, you know. There's plenty of erotic tension, but it's so very well done. I really enjoy this film, and I would say this is one of the best, like, lesbian vampire films ever made. So the film stars Delphine Seyrig as the Hungarian Countess Elizabeth Bathory. Now, this is not exactly an accurate portrayal of the true story, the true crime story of the Countess Elizabeth Bathory, who killed several women, allegedly anyway, way back in the, I think it was the 1600s. And there's so many myths about that story, about Countess Elizabeth Bathory, about, you know, what she did with these women, that she drank their blood. She drank the blood of these young virgins and bathed in their blood to give herself youth, you know, like the fountain of youth for her. It made her look more young and beautiful every time she killed someone. You know, that's kind of the myth that surrounds her. You know, those things could be true, but there's never really any proof of that. It's just kind of things that people have made up over the years, you know. But the Countess Elizabeth Bathory in this film is a vampire. Now, whether or not she is actually supposed to be the Countess Elizabeth Bathory, because this film does take place in the modern day in 1971. But it's never quite clear whether that's the case. It's kind of alluded to because she is a vampire, though maybe she is. You know, maybe she's lived this long, you know, because she's a vampire and she's been feeding off the blood of young virgins. But it's done in a vampire sort of way, you know. Yeah, like I said, the vampirism in this film is very subtle. They don't beat you over the head with all the classic tropes, although they are in there. They're just more subtle about it. Like the clear running water thing, you know, is in there. The allergy to sunlight is in there. You know, it does have a lot of the tropes, and we do see them biting people and draining their blood and all that. So what happened in the film is the Countess Elizabeth Bathory, played brilliantly by Delphine Seyrig, I might add. She's just so charming, and every time you see her on the screen, she just chews up the scenery, you know. She's so elegant, beautiful, charming, and you could see how she could really win with her charm and her seductive nature. So what happens is this young couple, Valerie and Stefan, who are newlyweds. They just got married, and they're on the way to England. They stop over in this like luxurious French hotel just to have some fun before they make their way home. And unfortunately, they run into the Countess Elizabeth Bathory, who's staying there with her beautiful young companion Ilona, played by Andrea Rao, who at that time was just a young model, and I believe this was her first picture. But she does a great job. She's very alluring, very exotic looking, and very seductive. And the newlyweds, played by Danielle O'May and John Carlin, and that's Stefan and Valerie. They have a very bizarre kind of relationship. Valerie seems to be just kind of the normal, lovely young girl next door, but this guy Stefan, there's something off about him. He's very odd, you know. He's very into morbid stuff, and he's into like some kinky stuff too in the bedroom, you know. At one point we see him beating her with a belt and slapping her, you know. They kind of roam around the streets, and they stumble upon this murder that happened, you know, and they're wheeling out a young girl's body. Because this murder is going on all around town, they find out. It's in the newspapers and everywhere. So they wheel out the young girl's dead body. Apparently she had been drained of all her blood. And he's very, like, infatuated with the girl's dead body. It's very weird, and he's trying to get up close to her, and his new wife, Valerie, is kind of peeking in on him, like, what are you doing? And he, like, he whacks her and, like, knocks her out onto the ground and never says a word about it, never says I'm sorry about that, or even acknowledges it, you know. It's crazy, just into weird stuff, you know. And Valerie's getting fed up with it. She says, you scare me, you know, at one point. You scare me the way you looked at that girl, the way you're into such morbid things, and, you know. And, you know, he beats on her, and is very violent with her when they have sex, and, you know. He's a weirdo. So at one point, she threatens to leave. She packs up her stuff in the suitcase and gets ready to take the next train out of there, even though they just got married, you know. Marriage is about to be over real quick. But, but then they run into the Countess, you know, and she's very charming, and, you know, the Countess actually chases her down to the train station and talks her into staying, you know. You can't leave him, you know. You guys just got married, you know. You can work it out, you know. And so she convinces her to stay, you know, just because obviously she has ulterior motives. She wants to prey upon this young, lovely couple, and, you know, God knows what she wants to do with them, you know. Yeah, so what happens is, while the Countess is kind of reeling her in, her companion, Ilona, pays a little visit to Stefan in the middle of the night and just kind of creeps in his room, you know, standing there. And she seduces him. And it gets wild and crazy, you know. And he starts to get violent with her, and he forces her into the shower with him, and yeah. As we know, vampires, you can't get them wet. Especially if you watch the old school Hammer vampire movies, you know, that clear running water. So she starts to freak out, you know. And she ends up, like, stumbling around the bathroom, and she gets cut by a razor blade that's on the counter, and then she starts, like, fighting the guy, and she topples over onto the ground and onto the razor blade and gets impaled with the razor blade, so she gets killed, you know. So, you know, now the Countess has lost her lifelong companion, you know, and guess who's next? Guess who's gonna be up to replace her? Valerie, of course. So she starts really preying on Valerie and Stefan, and, you know, trying to figure out how she can weave her way into their lives, you know. And so the film only had a budget of like $750,000, so definitely a kind of a low budget film, but they used the money very well. The elaborate set designs, the beautiful hotel, very gothic, and the color scheme is beautiful, you know, and the costume design is fantastic, you know. At one point you see Delphine as the Countess, dressed in this like glitterly shining like gown, and then you see the lights flaring into the screen. It's just like mesmerizing, as is the actress. Is very mesmerizing. It's perfect, you know. It's a very artfully done film, very creative and colorful. I just love it, you know. The acting is great. I love the cast. It's just a fantastic vampire film, and I love that it's never like over the top, you know. All the classic tropes of vampirism are very subtle, but they're in there, you know. if you look. I love this one great scene where I don't want to give away how it ends with the three, you know, with the young couple and the Countess. But at one point, when they're at a grave site, and the Countess kind of sneaks up behind Valerie, and she like spreads her cape up, and it looks like, you know, bat wings, and then she like covers her up, and that's awesome. It's like Countess Dracula, another great film, by the way, Countess Dracula from Hammer, based on the Countess Elizabeth Bathory. Yeah, but yeah, beautiful scenery, beautiful gothic tone and set design, great direction by Harry Kumel, and apparently there was a lot of tension on the set too with the director, and she was having some trouble with Danielle Ume, who plays Valerie in the film and the set, and he kind of like hit her and stuff. So like John Carlin, who plays Stefan, like punched him in the face and stuff. So yeah, a lot of tension on the set, and but they got a great movie out of it. And there's some great scenes when they're talking about the actual true story of Elizabeth Bathory, and you know how weird Stefan is, and he's just mesmerized about the Countess telling the story about the original Countess Bathory and what she did in the murders, and, you know, and he just really gets into it, you know, and he starts getting like, you know, really turned on by it. So it's like, what's going on with them, you know? And once again, that's the Countess reeling him in, you know, seducing him and preying on him, you know. And he says at one point, death seems to follow you around, you know. And that's exactly what happens. You see in the news about all the murders happening around town, you know, and there's this one guy who's like an ex-detective or whatever, and he just keeps randomly showing up throughout the film, like out of nowhere. It's kind of funny. But he shows up the right times when there's weird stuff going on, and, you know, and you wonder, is he going to solve the murder? He's going to solve the mystery? He's going to take out the Countess for good? And it leads to a very exciting conclusion. Again, I don't want to give away all the details of how it ends and what happens with the Countess, but I just highly recommend this film. You guys gotta see it if you love vampire films, if you love foreign horror. It's just a fantastic movie. If you want to see a great cast, if you want to see a great erotic horror film, and it is a very sexy film. Yes, there is a lot of nudity, but it never goes to the point of like sleaze or anything, you know. It's very artfully, tastefully done. It's very elegant, is a very beautiful film, so I highly recommend Daughters of Darkness, directed by Harry Kumel, released in 1971. And thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Erschen, in the Horror Corner. Tune in and stay scared. Folks, don't forget to grab your Sean Patrick Erschen gear and represent the Horror Corner. Also, check out these awesome mugs we have, perfect for your coffee. And definitely check out the Horror Hangout live stream t-shirt and represent the legacy of the Horror Hangout. Check out the link in the description below this video.